Hello and welcome to Inside Iraq. I'm Jassim Azawi. The war on Iraq in 2003 split Europe into two camps. Britain, Spain and Italy supported the US, while France and Germany opposed the war and warned the Bush administration of grave future consequences. Today, those bitter memories of European bickering are a thing of the past. But has Europe learned a valuable lesson from the invasion of Iraq? And is there a European perspective on Iraq, anchored by its colonial experience and a continental understanding of international law?
The US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003 put severe strains on European unity in the run-up to the war. Then US Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld stoked a diplomatic row with the Europeans by talking of an old and new Europe, saying that Europe's centre of gravity had shifted to the east. Besides Britain, Italy and Spain, many East European countries joined the US coalition in the invasion of Iraq. Rumsfeld openly criticised France and Germany for not supporting American military action in Iraq. Rumsfeld praised the East European nations for what he described as sharing America's vision for a more peaceful and secure world. President George Bush described these countries as the coalition of the willing. Rumsfeld's comments drew a sharp rebuttal from Germany, accusing the US of pitting Western and Eastern Europe against each other. Germany and France led other Western European countries, such as Greece, Austria and Sweden, in opposing the war. Officials from such countries accused the US of trying to bully its European allies into supporting its war. They claimed the US was offering incentives to the East European countries, such as support for NATO membership or other military and financial aid. Today, with new leaders at the helm, France and Germany seem to have shifted their positions on Iraq. Both French President Nicolas Sarkozy and Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel have sought to boost relations with the US, which were soured by the Iraq war. Besides diplomacy, there may be important economic considerations in play as Europeans seek to have a slice of the pie in Iraq's long-term reconstruction plans.
To discuss the European perspective on Iraq, I'm joined from Marseille, France, by former French ambassador and Middle East expert Eric Rouleau, and from Berlin by Henning Riecke, head of European Foreign and Security Policy Program at the German Council on Foreign Relations, and here in the studio by Alastair Campbell, director of United Services Institute, Qatar, perhaps better known as RUSI. Gentlemen, welcome to Inside Iraq. Ambassador Rouleau, let me start with me, and this episode is not meant to rehash the old subject of the right and wrong of the war. We're just trying to understand whether there is such thing as a European perspective on the war on Iraq. On the eve of the war, the French objection to the war, was that based on moral and legal ground, or was it based on security as well as regional ramification consideration?
Well, let me first say there's no such thing as a European perspective. You can say there are European perspectives in plural. Europe is not a political unit, as you know. It is more an economic assembly of countries than political. Public opinion, both in countries which supported the American intervention and those who did not support, public opinion was against that intervention. There were demonstrations, even in former communist countries in Europe, against the American intervention. The French, from the very beginning, didn't believe that the Iraqi problem can be solved by force. As a matter of fact, one French official once said that the problem in Iraq is not terrorism, it is occupation. And I think this view is still held by this government, even though there are better relations between Sarkozy and the American government, especially there will be better relation with Obama.
Let me get a response also from Henning Riecke. In Germany, was the constitution the main obstacle for the Germans to participate in this war, or was it also the public opinion, or in this matter, the history, the recent German history weighed in very much on the shoulders of the political leaders in Germany because of World War I and World War II?
I think the most important reason why Germany opposed to take part in the Iraq War of 2003 was that the German politicians predicted the difficult outcome, the complicated situation that would occur after the course of the operation. Germany is no longer, by its constitution, inhibited to send troops abroad for international operations and to work in the work with soldiers and the German Bundeswehr to fulfill the goals of the United Nations. We can do that. We need a parliamentary consent with that, and this is the only precondition. Also, the history that you speak about, the difficult past that Germany had in like invading its neighboring countries in the Second World War, it has been a problem, and it still is a great concern. But we have seen that for the sake of peace and the restoring of international orders, even people in the countries that had been invaded by the German Wehrmacht in the Second World War are now asking German soldiers to come and help. And so this like early hesitation has been overcome, and it's rather normal to have German soldiers abroad, but not in an operation that would most certainly lead into like devastation, that was not supported by international law that much, that didn't really have at that point in time when the Americans were planning a post-war reconstruction strategy that would work. And so in predicting what possibly would happen after the intervention, the Germans abstained. And then, because we had an election at that point and in time, and the Social Democratic ruling party wanted to win votes of the electorate, we obstructed and pressed against the American endeavors. A little bit, this had like tactical domestic reasons that were behind, but not the constitution.
Alastair Campbell, you heard Ambassador Rouleau referring to the demonstrations, and we saw perhaps even one of the most outstanding and biggest demonstration was in London and in major British cities. And yet, the Blair Prime Minister, he said, I'm going through with this. What possessed him, and to what extent that was a personal or perhaps a small party within the cabinet as opposed a reflection of the entire mood of the British people?
Yes, certainly the British position was much more equivocal than people give credit for now. Tony Blair had several red lines in 2002. He did not want to intervene in Iraq without full international support and an unambiguous United Nations resolution. However, he didn't get that. When it was apparent in 2003 that America was going to go to war anyway, on their own, whoever followed them, he thought it was better to join them and make the campaign quicker, more decisive than if he stood on the touchline just shouting abuse, as other nations did. However, he also misunderstood, shall we say, some of the intelligence and was able to persuade his parliament by 200 votes to go to war, followed, as you said, the following day or following weekend by huge demonstrations. So it's much more complicated, and had he known now, had he known then, would he know now, maybe he would have taken different sort of decisions. Furthermore, I think he was very disappointed not to get more traction with the Americans, not to be able to influence George Bush in the campaign and on other issues like the Israel-Palestine issue as a reward, in return for his unilateral support of America in their hour of need. So it's quite a complex position. I certainly also agree with Eric Rouleau. There's no European perspective on this. I think you never really have a European foreign policy on such issues like this.
Three different European perspectives. Eric Rouleau, let's go to the American perspective. And there is an overarching perspective within the Americans, and that is the American exceptionalism, that the world rules that governs pretty much international law somehow does not apply to the United States, simply because those rules, according to the Americans, are corrupt. These belongs to the old world as opposed to the new world. Was that the leeway? Was that pretty much the green light taken by the Bush administration in order to go through this war, whether there was a second resolution at the United Nations or not?
Well, I think we have to distinguish the administration of Mr. Bush with other administrations. Mr. Bush believed that military intervention was the best way of stopping Iraq of being a nuisance. The French, to come back to the French position, was not only that our experts here believe that the invasion of Iraq will be a failure and can be a catastrophe because of past history. Any Middle Eastern expert will tell you that Iraq is never accepted foreign occupation. And just remember what happened in the 1920s, when there was a treaty which was signed with Great Britain, and you had an upsurge in Iraq. The second reason, which I didn't mention a few minutes ago, the second reason has never been expressed publicly by a French official, but I know it is a fact. The French government was not sure that Mr. Bush's intentions were absolutely pure. There was a big suspicion that the Americans were trying to introduce themselves in Iraq for many reasons. One of them is that they wanted to control that part of the world, and especially control Iraq, which is a very important country. And that the intention was to create some bases, military bases. So it was not at all considered as a pure intention of stopping Iraq from having arms of mass destruction, which, by the way, the French experts here doubted that Iraq had any.
I think that although I agree with much of what Mr. Rouleau is saying, there's no doubt that one of the reasons America felt it had to act on its own was that France deserted United Nations. Having signed up to resolutions 687, 688, 705, 71, 711, 1137, many others, it then deserted them and left Britain and America only containing Saddam Hussein. Having deserted United Nations, having undermined United Nations really for largely commercial, opportunistic reasons in the 90s, then is it surprising that George Bush comes into power, 9/11, they want to take military action without the United Nations?
Alastair Campbell, thank you very much. We'll take a short break now. When we come back, we are going to talk about Iraq post-Bush with the Obama administration coming in. Stay with us.
Germany has been a problem and France has been a problem. But you look at vast numbers of other countries in Europe and they're neither with France nor with Germany. They're with the US. Donald Rumsfeld, US Secretary of Defense, 2001 to 2006.